On the morning of August 6, 2005, the bustling port city of Fortaleza, located in northeastern Brazil, awoke to an ordinary weekend. As the townspeople went about their daily lives, an extraordinary event destined for the history books was about to unfold at a state bank. No alarms had gone off, no shots had been fired, and no trace had been left behind. Yet more than 160 million Brazilian reais in cash had silently vanished from the central bank's vault. At that time, this meant $70 million and amounted to approximately 3.5 tons of cash. It was the biggest cash robbery in Brazil's history and one of the largest in the world. When authorities began looking underground, they came across one of the most ingenious crimes ever. It began at a fake lawn care shop and led to a narrow tunnel stretching for meters. A robbery plan you'd only expect to see in the movies. While we were all watching La Casa de Papel and thinking it was just fiction, I assure you this real-life robbery, planned as cleverly as the show, is one of the most extraordinary heists ever documented. Here is the unbelievable story of how millions of dollars vanished underground. Everything began months before the day of the robbery. The mastermind behind the plan was Jussi Van Santos, known by the nickname Alamo, but there was also the man who provided the money, Fernando Ribeiro, nicknamed Fernandinho. He was the financier of the plan and its dark side. Each member of the robbery gang, which numbered about 34 people, had a specific role. Construction workers, professional tunnel diggers, former criminals, people with engineering expertise, and, most importantly, the bank's security guards who leaked information from the inside. When Alemo began searching for a strategic house near the bank, his goal was simple: to start from a location where no one would be suspicious and dig a tunnel that would reach the vault of the Central Bank of Brazil, the very symbol of the nation's financial security. The bank was known for its fortress-like security, and its underground vaults held huge sums of cash, which made it an irresistible target for determined thieves. After weeks of reconnaissance, a modest house was rented on a quiet, out-of-the-way street close enough to the bank. On a quiet, out-of-the-way street close enough to the bank. But such an excavation would produce a lot of soil, and someone might notice. The plan needed a cover. The solution chosen to hide the tunnel's construction was to set up a fake turf company. Since turf involves soil, nobody would be suspicious when trucks carrying bags of sand left the house. The place was immediately painted green and given the name Grama Sintética. From the outside, it looked like a legitimate turf and landscaping shop. The person who set up the company was a gang member known by the alias Paulo Sergio. His fake ID listed a date of birth of May 8, 1968. That date matched exactly the date the robbery would take place. The fact that the fake ID's birth date matched the robbery date is a chilling detail that suggests the criminals took pleasure in flaunting their cleverness. Sergio built excellent relationships with the neighbors, successfully deflecting any potential suspicions. They even had a van decorated with the company's logo, and fake invoices were issued to create the impression that real business was being conducted there. In other words, the artificial turf shop was far more than just a simple cover. Through this front, they were able to observe the area for weeks, analyze the underground structure, and finally determine the exact line where the tunnel would be dug. No one could have imagined that behind this ordinary business, the greatest criminal project in Brazil's history was being meticulously constructed. When the first shovel struck the ground, the calendar showed May. After all the preparations were complete, the gang began digging a tunnel from about 4 meters beneath the house's floor toward the bank's vault. A 7-man team worked tirelessly in shifts using garden shovels. At the front, one man dug the soil and pushed it aside. The man behind him put the soil into a sack. Another tied the sack shut and fastened it to a rope, and someone else pulled it toward the exit. Outside, the rest of the team stacked the sacks, and the digging went on day and night without pause. The biggest logistical problem during the tunnel excavation was how to quietly and inconspicuously get rid of the massive amount of soil. Hundreds of truckloads of earth were hauled away at night under the pretense of fake landscaping work and dumped in a remote location outside the city. During this time, special care was taken to ensure the vans didn't look dirty from the outside, and the soil inside was covered with tarps. This process went on for quite some time. However, since hauling soil every single day began to look a bit suspicious, they started storing the filled sacks instead. Once a room was completely full, they walled it off. Then when another room filled up, they did the same thing again. Eventually, when all the rooms were full, they began dumping the soil into the garden, which caused the ground level to rise by about 1 meter. This went on for months without arousing the suspicion of any neighbors or authorities. Digging a tunnel normally produces a noise that would draw attention. You might wonder how they managed to remain unnoticed for so long, but the truth is they were never discovered. While those around them saw them as ordinary working people, underground they were moving forward like a well-oiled crime machine. During the excavation, they came across a sewage network at one point. In that situation, they slightly adjusted the tunnel's direction and continued digging. By the time the tunnel was nearly complete, it measured 80 meters long and 70 centimeters wide. This was a size that only one person could pass through by crawling or stooping. Narrow but incredibly functional. In a tunnel of this length, oxygen levels drop quickly and carbon dioxide buildup reaches dangerous levels. The robbers anticipated this and set up a ventilation system to breathe easily throughout the tunnel. They used a fan at the entrance and pipes running along the tunnel to continuously pump in fresh air. To prevent a landslide, the walls were reinforced with approximately 900 wooden boards. There were also hose systems to carry drinking water, and they used battery-powered lamps for lighting, which eliminated the risk of a power outage. To avoid using phones and leaving behind electronic evidence, an intercom system was used. This system provided constant communication in case of any external interference or emergencies inside the tunnel. The use of GPS and local maps also ensured that underground infrastructure beneath the streets was not damaged during the digging. This resembled more of an underground metro line than a crime tunnel. As you can see, this was not just a tunnel. It was truly an engineering marvel. As the moment of the robbery approached, the tension rose. And after exactly 3 months, on the evening of Friday, August 5th, 2005, the tunnel's end reached directly beneath the central bank's underground vault. Weeks of calculations and measurements had brought them to the target with millimetric precision. At this point, one might ask how the robbers knew exactly where the bank's underground vault was located. The main reason was information obtained from the bank's former security guards, Diosimar Marqueos and Edelson Vieira. Both had worked as security guards at the central bank, and that position had granted them lawful access to the bank's sensitive areas. Details such as the locations of the vaults, the timing of security patrols, and how the alarm systems operated formed the basis for planning the robbery, and the gang succeeded in digging the tunnel directly under the vault. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the gang included people with engineering knowledge. That allowed them to reach the target by calculating it with scientific methods rather than by guessing. The smallest deviation could have thrown them off course, but it didn't. The robbers chose the weekend to carry out the robbery. This strategic timing was meant to minimize the risk of direct confrontation and maximize the time available for the operation. The bank being closed, the guards being less alert, and the surrounding activity being at its lowest provided ideal conditions for the operation to proceed smoothly. Now only one obstacle remained: the bank's vault wall. The bank's vault was protected by an approximately 1 meter thick reinforced concrete wall with steel. To overcome this massive obstacle, they used heavy-duty equipment specially designed for the task: industrial drills, hydraulic jacks, metal cutters, and welding machines. This part of the operation was very dangerous because it produced a lot of noise. However, because the bank was closed, no one noticed the sounds or vibrations. After a total of 3 hours of work, the wall was breached and they managed to get inside. The forklift used to transport money inside had been left, either by accident or deliberately, right in front of the camera's field of view earlier that day. As a result, when they emerged from the hole, they were not caught on camera. Later on, just in case they ended up in the camera's line of sight, they placed a few pallets directly in front of the hole. This way, the cameras couldn't capture the hole either. The four-person team moved carefully inside, avoiding motion sensors by staying close to the walls and being extremely cautious. They reached vaults filled with millions of Brazilian reais. Since the serial numbers of newly printed banknotes were recorded, they could be easily traced, so the robbers avoided touching them. Their target was the older 50 real banknotes, which either couldn't be tracked by serial number or were scheduled to be taken out of circulation. These notes weren't organized by serial number by the bank, making them nearly impossible to trace once they re-entered circulation. The gang members then began removing the money from the vaults quickly and in an organized manner. Everyone had a specific role. Some were taking the money out, some were counting it, and others were filling sacks and getting them ready to carry out. The removal of the money began at 10 p.m. on Friday evening and was completed by 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. The amount they stole was staggering: 164 million Brazilian reais. At the time, this amount was equivalent to roughly 70 million US dollars and had a total weight of 3.5 tons. When you imagine that kind of weight in paper money, it literally means you have a mountain of cash. If all the money were stacked on top of each other, it would reach a height of 330 meters, making making it, at that time, the largest cash robbery in Brazil's history, and even one of the biggest in the world. After 11 hours of intense work, the final stage of the plan began, the escape. To move such a massive load out through the tunnel, they used a specially constructed rail system. The transportation took hours and was carried out with military-like discipline along the tunnel's single narrow lane. Considering the tight space, this process must have been extremely challenging and time-consuming. By the end of the 3-month operation, every member of the gang knew exactly how much their share would be. For the leaders and financiers, the cut ranged between 10 and 20 million res, while the workers, those who did the digging, received around 2 million each. After splitting the shares, they loaded the money into pre-arranged vehicles and company vans, and like smoke, seemingly vanished into the darkness of the night. All that remained were 2 holes and the astonishing story of a robbery that would shock Brazil. When bank employees returned to work on Monday morning after the weekend break, everything seemed normal at first. The doors were intact, the cameras were running, and the security alarm was silent until someone went to the vault. The staff who went down to the vault couldn't believe their eyes. The doors were locked, but the vault was completely empty, and stacks of money, individual banknotes, were scattered on the dirty floor. Leaving all that money behind could only be explained by the robbers making a rushed escape. The hole in the floor of the vault caused great astonishment among the employees. The police were immediately called, and an investigation was launched. Robbery, vault, hole, tunnel. It was clear that this was no ordinary heist. Upon this, police officer Aeneas Soprera entered the tunnel, not knowing what dangers or individuals he might encounter, and crawled through it for nearly an hour. When he could go no further, he climbed upward and reached the exit. In this way, he was able to inform the others of the tunnel's starting point. When the police arrived there, it was as if they had stumbled upon a mine. Excavation tools, work equipment, gravel, canned food, clothing, and hundreds of sandbags piled up to the ceiling. In addition, a white powder-like substance had been scattered all over the house. They had used it to eliminate fingerprints. The team was so professional that after stealing the money, they all disappeared at the same time. Each one had planned their own route. Some fled to other cities while others escaped abroad. Some began laundering the money: hotels, cars, luxury living, fake identities. Some vanished without a trace, but others attracted far too much attention. As you can imagine, becoming a millionaire under these circumstances came with many challenges. One of them was that the entire fortune consisted of 50-unit banknotes. As long as things were cheap, paying in cash wasn't a problem. But when the price was high, making a payment became much more difficult. In fact, the day after the crime was committed, a few members of the gang decided to purchase 10 vehicles from a car dealership, paying nearly 1 million reais in 50-unit banknotes. Later, 6 million reais were hidden inside the bodywork of these vehicles, which were then sent to São Paulo by truck. This immediate and cash-heavy purchase caught the attention of the dealership employees, who reported the information to the police. Buying so many vehicles at once was a rather unusual event. By paying in cash, they revealed that they were unprepared for the escape phase and ended up leaving behind many clues. Interestingly, while the group had carried out a highly sophisticated and well-planned operation during the crime itself, they acted quite carelessly afterward. As a result, several robbers were caught within the first few days. However, the masterminds behind the heist remained completely out of reach. As soon as news of the incident leaked to the public, it sent a shockwave across the country. It wasn't just the amount of money stolen that stunned people. The incredible display of engineering genius, meticulous planning, and remarkable to camouflage also made headlines around the world. In response, the Brazilian police launched the largest manhunt in the country's history. The situation escalated to such a degree that even the FBI joined the investigation, fearing the heist might have international implications. Efforts to trace the stolen money proved especially complicated due to the 50 real banknotes that had become too soiled during their journey through the tunnel to be properly tracked. By November 2005, however, the authorities had managed to arrest 13 individuals directly involved in the robbery. The purchased cars, documents linked to the house rented by Sergio, and a prepaid mobile phone card provided the first major leads in the investigation. From the serial number of the phone card found by police while searching the house, they were able to identify the device it had been used with, which led to hundreds of hours of recorded conversations that allowed investigators to track the gang. These conversations revealed how the group had split up, how the stolen money was converted into assets, and how various new criminal activities were financed. Although it initially appeared to be a flawless crime, a wave of blackmail, kidnappings, and murders began to follow in its aftermath. So much so that the stolen money came to be referred to as cursed. One of the gang leaders, Fernandinho, was kidnapped by his own crew not long after the heist. Despite his family paying a large ransom, he was still killed. His body was found on the side of a highway near Fortaleza. This incident exposed the deep mistrust, greed, and the ruthless lengths people were willing to go for money within the gang. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed on without slowing down, with hundreds of agents involved. Most of those captured were caught while trying to launder the stolen money through luxury cars, real estate, and the trafficking of drugs and weapons. For example, another gang leader, Alamão, was captured in 2008 after years on the run while attempting to launder the money. He was tried on charges such as forming a criminal organization, using forged documents, and money laundering, and was sentenced to 49 years and 2 months in prison. However, despite all this, he continued to make plans. Years later, in 2017, while attempting to escape from Fortaleza prison, Alamão was shot and spent 3 days receiving treatment in the hospital. The investigations and efforts to recover the money went on for years, and a total of 129 people were arrested in connection with the robbery. From the very first trial onward, the combined prison sentences handed down exceeded 2,452 years. However, despite the massive investigation and numerous arrests, only 11% of the stolen money was recovered. That amounted to roughly 18 million. The majority of the money disappeared and was never found. So where did the 164 million go? Even today, the fate of that 3.5 tons of money remains a mystery for many Brazilians. Perhaps one day, traces of this money will be discovered deep in Brazil's untamed forests or in a coastal town, or it will vanish forever, along with those who kept the secret. Now I'm off to prepare my next content for you. In the meantime, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means a lot to me. Take care of yourselves. See you soon.